Elias walked slowly through the soft, damp soil, his boots sinking slightly with each step. The rain had just stopped, leaving the desert-like terrain glistening under a pale orange sun that peeked through the storm clouds. He bent to examine a strange plant, its leaves curling with droplets of water. It was unusual, almost alien even by this planet's standards. Most plants here had adapted to survive long stretches without rain, yet this one seemed to drink it in, thriving in the brief moments the storms provided. Elias marveled at it. Even after years on the terraforming project, he never grew tired of the planet's surprises. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a subtle, fresh scent, cool and clean, almost like rain itself. Elias paused. He wasn't thinking about the weather. He had smelled rain before, but this was different. It was sharper, warmer, and somehow personal. He turned toward the source, expecting to see a patch of wet soil, or perhaps some exotic creature. But he saw something entirely unexpected. A woman stood a few meters away, half hidden among the rocks. She was tall and slender, with skin that shimmered faintly in the remaining light. Her hair was long, dark, and clung to her damp shoulders. But what struck Elias the most was the faint, sweet smell that surrounded her, like the planet itself had chosen her as its vessel. Without thinking, he said softly, "You smell like rain." The woman froze, her eyes widening in surprise. She stepped back slightly, tilting her head as if listening to him, or perhaps listening to something he couldn't hear. For a long moment, there was silence. Then she leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. "You noticed." Elias swallowed, unsure whether to speak. Her tone was gentle, not angry, but it carried a weight he could not name. It was a sound that made him feel like he had crossed an invisible boundary, yet at the same time, she did not pull away. I didn't mean anything," Elias said quickly, though his voice betrayed his awe. "It's just different."
I've never smelled anything like it here. She did not move.
Her dark eyes studied him carefully, and Elias felt exposed in a way he had never experienced. He realized that this was not merely a human reaction to something strange. She was examining him with the same curiosity he had felt toward her. "I am Lyra," she said after a moment, her voice soft but steady.
"And you are Elias," he replied. "I'm a scientist."
"I study this planet." He paused, then added, "I didn't mean to intrude. He gestured vaguely to the air, unsure how to explain the sudden bond he felt. Noticed. Lyra's lips curved slightly. It was not a smile, not yet, but it held something gentle. Something human. Elias found himself holding his breath. He had been trained to approach alien life carefully, to catalog it, to observe without interference. But this was no ordinary encounter. This was personal. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the scent of rain, now mixed with the faint smell of her. Elias realized that it wasn't just the rain. It was her, or perhaps the combination of both. He could not explain it, and that fact thrilled him more than anything he had studied before. "You are sensitive," Lyra said finally, almost as if reading his thoughts. "You notice what others do not." I guess," Elias replied, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. "I've always paid attention to small details. It helps me understand things better." Lyra nodded slowly, then glanced over her shoulder at the darkening horizon. The clouds were moving again, heavy and thick. Lightning flickered far off in the distance, and the air smelled metallic, charged. She turned back to him. "You should not be here alone," she said. "This place, it is dangerous for those unprepared." Elias smiled faintly. "I am prepared," he said, though in truth he was only partially right. He had come equipped for storms, for alien flora, for the unpredictable weather. But he was not prepared for her, not at all. Lyra studied him again, then made a decision. She walked toward him, her movements fluid, almost gliding across the wet soil. Elias stepped back slightly, unsure whether to flee or follow. The space between them closed, yet it felt like nothing had changed. "You wish to learn," she said simply. "Do you understand what that means?" I think so," Elias said, trying to steady his voice. "It means observing, asking questions, trying to see beyond what is obvious." She nodded. "Perhaps, or perhaps, it means understanding without words, seeing without seeking." Elias frowned. He had spent years studying alien species, but this encounter challenged everything he had learned. There was a depth to her, a complexity that could not be catalogued, measured, or analyzed. She existed in ways he could not yet comprehend. "Why are you here?" he asked cautiously. "Are you native to this area?" Lyra's eyes flicked to the horizon again. "I am not from here," she said softly. "But this place calls to me." She stepped closer, and Elias could feel the faint warmth radiating from her, mingling with the smell of rain that seemed to surround her. "You notice the world differently than others," she said, almost as if continuing a conversation that had begun inside his mind rather than aloud. "You see what is hidden. That is why I speak to you." Elias felt a thrill, a mixture of fear and fascination. He had spent years on this planet, and yet no human or alien presence had affected him like this. He wanted to speak, to ask her questions, but the words seemed small and inadequate. "Do you want to come closer?" she asked, and the simple invitation sent a shiver through him. He nodded, stepping forward. The ground was slick with rainwater, and he moved carefully, but it felt as though gravity had less hold here, as if the air itself welcomed his presence. Lyra did not flinch, did not move away. She simply waited, watching him approach. Finally, they stood a few feet apart. Elias could see her clearly now, the subtle patterns on her skin, the way her eyes reflected the storm clouds above, the faint mist that seemed to hover around her like a halo. And he could still smell it, the scent of rain, soft and constant, mingled with something else, something he could not name but felt in his chest. "You are unlike anything I have ever studied," he admitted. "I have never seen someone like you." Lyra tilted her head slightly, considering him. "And yet you notice me," she said, almost smiling. "Even in a storm, even when the world is loud, you notice what is small, what is hidden." "It is instinct," he said. "I cannot explain why, but I notice things others do not." "It's how I understand the world. You understand more than the world," she replied softly. "You understand what others overlook? That is rare." They were silent for a moment, the wind rustling around them, the smell of rain heavy and rich. Elias realized that for the first time, he was not thinking of data, of analysis, of survival. He was simply present. Lyra's gaze shifted to the distant mountains, where the last flashes of lightning still danced. "The storm will return soon," she said. "And when it does, it will bring changes. You must be careful." "I can handle storms," Elias said quickly, though he knew she was referring to more than weather. "I've survived worse than this." She did not respond immediately. Instead, she extended her hand slightly, a silent gesture of trust. Elias hesitated, then reached out. Their fingers brushed, and he felt a spark, subtle but undeniable, like static electricity in the damp air. "You are different," she said finally. "Different from those who see only the surface. Perhaps we can learn from each other." Elias felt a rush of excitement and trepidation. The idea that an alien being, someone completely foreign, might trust him, might teach him things he could not learn alone. It was exhilarating. "I would like that," he said. "I want to understand." I want to learn.
Lyra nodded as if she had been waiting for him to say it. Then we will begin, she said.
But first, you must remember one thing.
Anything, Elias said. You must always notice, she whispered.
Even when the world tries to hide itself, even when storms cover the truth, to notice is to survive. The wind shifted again, and for a brief moment the storm seemed to pause. The desert was quiet, alive, and shimmering. Elias felt the weight of her words sink in. He understood, instinctively, that this encounter was the beginning of something profound, something that would challenge everything he had known about his planet, about life, and about himself. For a long time they stood in silence, two figures in a world washed clean by rain. And though neither spoke, Elias knew he had crossed a threshold. He had noticed. And Lyra, she had noticed that he noticed. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert-like plains, casting long shadows across the wet soil. Elias woke early, as he often did, his mind already filled with thoughts of the previous day's encounter. Lyra, the memory of her presence, her voice, the faint scent of rain that seemed to cling to her, refused to leave him. He had spent hours walking among the plants, hoping to find traces of her, hoping to understand what he had felt when she whispered, "You noticed." He did not know what to expect. Part of him feared that she might vanish like a dream, leaving only the memory of her, fleeting and unreachable. Yet a stronger part, the part that had always driven him to explore and to discover, urged him to find her, to learn more about the alien being who had stirred something deep within him. By mid-morning, Elias was walking near a small cluster of rock formations where he had glimpsed her before. The ground was still damp, reflecting the sun in tiny glimmers, and the air was filled with the faint smell of rain lingering in the soil. As he moved carefully over the rocks, he felt the sense of being watched. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make his senses alert. Then he saw her. Lyra stood at the edge of a small cliff, her figure outlined by the sunlight. She was watching the horizon, her hair glistening with dampness, the soft mist around her shimmering in the morning light. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. Even without speaking, she had a presence that seemed to command attention, not through force, but through something more subtle. Grace, awareness, and an almost magnetic, quiet power.
Lyra! Elias called softly, careful not to startle her. She turned her head slightly, acknowledging him without moving.
You returned, she said, her voice calm and steady, carrying no judgment, only observation.
Yes, Elias replied. I could not stop thinking about yesterday, about you, about the rain. I need to understand. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, but it was not suspicion. It was thoughtfulness. Understanding is not always simple, she said. It requires patience. It requires seeing beyond what is visible. I can do that, Elias said. I've spent years learning to observe. I think I can understand if you teach me. For a long moment she remained silent. Then she nodded slowly. Very well, but first you must listen carefully. What you think you know is only the beginning. You must let the world speak to you. Elias took a deep breath and stepped closer, careful not to break whatever invisible barrier she had placed between them. The air was filled with the faint scent of rain, but there was something else now. A subtle warmth that seemed to rise from her and mingle with the sunlight. It was strange and comforting at the same time, like standing near a fire on a cold day. They walked together through the rocks and shallow gullies, Lyra moving effortlessly over the uneven terrain while Elias struggled to match her pace. Despite her fluid movements, she was patient with him, slowing down occasionally to allow him to catch up. She seemed aware of everything: the land, the air, the plants, the small animals that scurried from the wet soil. Elias watched her carefully, fascinated by the way she interacted with the world, as if she were listening to a conversation that only she could hear. Finally, she stopped beside a small pool of water formed from the night's rain. She knelt gracefully and touched the surface with her fingers. The water shimmered, almost as if responding to her presence. Elias knelt beside her, trying to see what she was seeing, but it was just water to him. "Do you see?" she asked softly, not looking at him. I see water," Elias said, unsure of what else to say. Lyra smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Do not only see Elias."
Listen! Feel!
The rain brought life, yes, but it also brought warning. The soil is soft.
The wind is changing. The storm will come again. Stronger.
Elias frowned. Another storm? Lyra's gaze shifted to the horizon, where dark clouds were gathering once more.
Yes, and not just rain.
The storm carries signals, messages from this world that many overlook. You, however, notice. That is why I speak with you. Elias felt a mix of awe and excitement. He had spent years studying alien life, but nothing had prepared him for this. Here was a being who could perceive the world in ways humans could barely imagine, and yet she trusted him enough to share it. "How do you know so much?" he asked.
Do you live here? I am not of this place, Lyra said softly, but I am connected.
"My people are attuned to life, to patterns, to what others call the invisible. I can sense the weather, the land, and even the smallest changes in the air. You can learn this too, if you are willing to notice and understand."
Elias nodded.
"I want to learn. Teach me." Lyra studied him for a moment, then extended her hand, not in greeting, but as an invitation. "Then follow me," she said. "Observe. Do not judge. Only notice. The first lesson begins now." They moved together across the rocky plains, the faint scent of rain following Lyra like a shadow. Elias focused intently, trying to see what she saw, the small details that had once seemed meaningless, the way a leaf bent under the water, the subtle ripple of the soil, the quiet rustle of tiny creatures, began to make sense. He realized that every movement, every sound carried information. If he paid attention, "You are improving quickly," Lyra said. "Few humans can notice so much in so little time. Most see only the surface." Elias smiled, feeling a rush of pride.
I've always tried to see more than what is obvious, he admitted. I think it's why I study this planet.
"There's always more than meets the eye." Lyra nodded, as if approving his honesty. "Good. That is the first step. Understanding begins with noticing. The second step is patience. You cannot rush the world, nor can you rush me." They continued walking until they reached a narrow canyon, the walls smooth and glistening from the rain. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the faint metallic scent of the planet's minerals. Lyra stopped at the entrance and turned to him. "This place is dangerous," she said. "Many humans would not survive here without preparation. But you have potential. You notice. You are aware. That will keep you safe if you continue to listen." Elias nodded, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. He had faced dangers before. Storms, rough terrain, alien wildlife. But this felt different. He felt that the canyon itself was alive, watching them, testing them. Lyra led him carefully into the narrow passage, her movements confident and precise. Elias followed, doing his best to match her pace. The canyon walls were high, and the shadows cast by the sunlight created strange patterns that danced across the rocks. Elias tried to take note of every detail, just as she had taught him, and found that the canyon revealed its secrets slowly, almost as if it was teaching him its language. After some time, they reached a small clearing where the sunlight poured through an opening in the canyon. Lyra stopped and turned to him.
"You have done well," she said.
You are learning to notice what is hidden, to understand what is not spoken. That is rare among humans.
Elias felt a swell of pride. I am trying, he said.
I want to understand everything. You, the planet.
Everything. Lyra's eyes softened slightly.
Understanding is not about control, she said. It is about connection.
You must feel the world, not dominate it. You must listen, not just hear. You must notice and then act only when necessary. Elias nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He realized that she was teaching him more than just survival. She was teaching him a way of being, a way of perceiving life that he had never considered. For hours they moved through the canyon, Lyra pointing out small details and subtle changes in the environment. Elias tried to replicate her observations, and slowly he began to see what she saw. He noticed patterns in the plants, subtle shifts in the wind, and even small tremors in the earth that hinted at hidden underground movements. Each observation felt like a small victory, a step closer to understanding her world, and perhaps understanding her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon, Lyra finally stopped. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You have done well today," she said, "but tomorrow will be harder."
The storm will return, stronger than before. You must be ready, Elias.
You must continue to notice, even when fear rises, even when the world seems to hide its truth.
Elias nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension.
He had spent his life studying planets, alien species, and unknown phenomena, but nothing had prepared him for this. He realized that his connection with Lyra was more than curiosity. It was a bond, fragile and new, but real. "I will be ready," he said. "I want to learn everything you can teach me." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile.
Then rest, she said. Tomorrow you will need all your senses.
And remember, noticing is the key. Never forget that. As Elias lay beneath the stars that night, he thought about everything he had learned, everything he had felt. He realized that the storm, the canyon, the plants, and most of all, Lyra, were all part of a lesson far greater than survival. It was about understanding, connection, and the courage to see what others overlooked. The faint smell of rain lingered in his memory, and he knew that it would follow him, guiding him, reminding him that noticing could change everything. And as he drifted into sleep, he felt a quiet certainty that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test his limits, expand his understanding, and perhaps, in time, reveal the true depth of what it meant to notice. The wind howled across the plains as Elias and Lyra approached the higher ridges of the desert. The clouds above were dark and heavy, streaked with violet lightning that illuminated the landscape in brief flashes. The storm had returned, just as Lyra had predicted, and it was stronger than before. Elias could feel the electric charge in the air, a tingling in his skin that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He glanced at Lyra, who moved through the rough terrain as if the wind itself obeyed her.
"This is worse than yesterday," he said, shouting over the roar of the approaching storm.
"How can we survive this?" Lyra's dark eyes were steady, calm, and piercing. "You survive by noticing, Elias," she said, "by seeing what others miss, by feeling the patterns in the world. The storm is not only danger, it is information." He frowned, trying to understand. "Information?" "Yes," she said, gesturing to the skies and the land. "Watch the clouds, the wind, the soil. Each change tells a story. Each pattern has meaning."
Learn it, and you can act before disaster strikes. Elias focused, squinting through the gusts of wind.
He noticed subtle changes, the way the low rocks reflected the light differently, the faint tremors in the ground as the storm approached, and the way tiny creatures scuttled to shelter long before he could even see the rain. It was overwhelming at first, but under Lyra's guidance, he began to understand the rhythm. "They move before the storm," he said, pointing to the small animals disappearing into burrows. "They know it's coming." Lyra nodded. "Not just animals. The land itself moves and shifts. You must learn to listen to it as they do. You are improving, but now is the true test."
The storm hit with a sudden fury. Rain pounded the ridges, drenching them instantly.
The wind screamed, carrying sharp grains of sand that cut at Elias's skin. Lightning flashed dangerously close, illuminating the alien landscape in stark white bursts. Elias struggled to maintain his footing, his heart racing with adrenaline. He could barely see Lyra through the downpour, yet somehow she moved with perfect balance, guiding him as if the storm was a friend rather than a threat. "Follow me," she shouted over the wind, and Elias did. They reached a narrow ravine where the rocks formed a natural corridor. The storm funneled through the opening, creating a roar that shook the ground. Elias stumbled, but caught himself, glancing at Lyra for reassurance. She was steady, calm, almost untouched by the chaos around them. Her presence was a strange anchor in the violent storm, and he realized how much he depended on her guidance. "You must trust what you notice," she yelled. "Do not wait for fear to guide you. Act on observation." Elias took a deep breath, scanning the ravine. He noticed the subtle incline of the rocks, the small depressions that would collect water, and the slight shift in the wind currents. He made a snap decision, directing them along a safer path that avoided a large gully filled with rainwater. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes wide for just a moment. Then she nodded in approval. "Good," she said.
You are learning to act without hesitation. That is the difference between survival and failure.
The rain intensified. Water poured down the rocks, forming rivulets that tried to sweep them off their feet. Elias felt the surge of adrenaline mixed with fear, but he also felt something else, a growing confidence. He had noticed patterns, predicted movement, and acted. The storm was no longer an unknown force. It was a challenge he could face, step by step, with Lyra guiding him and his own mind alert to details others would miss. As they moved further into the ravine, a loud crack echoed through the air. A flash of lightning struck a distant rock formation, sending a shower of debris down the slope. Elias froze, heart pounding. Lyra's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "Do not panic," she said calmly.
Notice. Move.
Act. He looked around, his eyes scanning the falling rocks, the rushing water, the wind that threatened to throw him off balance. Then he saw it, a small ledge just above the flow of water, shielded from the worst of the debris.
There!
He shouted. Lyra's eyes followed his gesture, and without hesitation, she moved with him toward the ledge. They scrambled up just as another wave of debris swept through the ravine. Elias's muscles ached from the effort. His lungs burned from the wind and exertion, but he felt alive, sharper than he had ever felt before. The storm was fierce, but he was learning to dance with it, not merely endure it. Once they reached the ledge, they paused, panting, water dripping from their clothes and hair. Elias looked at Lyra, amazed. "We survived," he said. Lyra's expression was serious. "Yes, for now. But storms are only part of the challenge. Humans often think technology alone can save them. It cannot. Understanding, observation, action. These are the true tools of survival." Elias nodded, still catching his breath. He realized she was right. Most of the human teams he had worked with relied on sensors, drones, and alarms. They rarely noticed subtle changes in the environment, subtle signs that could prevent disaster. With Lyra, he was learning something no technology could teach: intuition, awareness, and the courage to act based on careful observation. The storm raged on, but they had found a small shelter beneath the ledge. Elias huddled close to the rocks, shivering, and felt Lyra's presence nearby. She did not speak for a while, but he could sense her attentiveness, the way she seemed to scan the environment constantly, alert to danger. He tried to emulate her, focusing on the sound of the wind, the direction of the rain, and the subtle vibrations of the earth beneath him. Hours passed, the storm did not let up, and Elias's energy began to fade. But Lyra's patience never wavered. She guided him through the ravine, showing him small, safe spots, teaching him to read the water flow, and pointing out minor shifts in the rocks that could signal danger. Each lesson was a test, a challenge, and Elias rose to meet it. He began to see patterns in the chaos, a rhythm to the storm that he could predict if he stayed attentive. By nightfall, the storm finally began to weaken. The wind died down, leaving a soft drizzle and the faint smell of rain lingering in the air. Elias and Lyra emerged from the ravine, soaked but unharmed. Elias looked at her, gratitude and admiration written across his face.
You saved me, he said quietly.
Lyra shook her head. You saved yourself, she said. I guided you, yes, but you noticed.
You acted. You survived because you learned to see what others ignore.
That is what makes humans remarkable. Elias blinked, surprised.
Remarkable? Yes, Lyra said. Humans have potential.
Your species can adapt, learn, and rise to challenges that others cannot. You notice, you understand, you act. You are capable of greatness when you pay attention to what is hidden. Elias felt a rush of pride mixed with humility. He had always believed that humans were clever and resourceful, but this was the first time he truly felt the weight of what that could mean. Under Lyra's guidance, he realized that observation, patience, and courage were more powerful than any technology or weapon. Humans could endure, adapt, and thrive in ways few beings could imagine. As they made their way back to the base, the desert landscape was transformed. Puddles reflected the lightning-streaked clouds. Wet soil glistened, and tiny streams wound through the rocks like veins of life. Elias felt a deep connection to the planet, a new understanding that had nothing to do with instruments or measurements. It was intuitive, alive, and full of meaning. Lyra walked beside him silently for a while, and then she spoke.
Tomorrow, the storm's after effects will bring new challenges. The land will shift. The creatures will move. You must be ready.
I will, Elias said. I have learned so much already.
I want to continue learning with you.
She glanced at him briefly, her eyes unreadable. Then you will. But remember this. Noticing is only the first step. Understanding comes next, and action must follow. Do not let fear or pride guide you. Let the world guide you, as I have guided you. Elias nodded, absorbing her words. They continued in silence, the desert around them quiet now, except for the soft dripping of water from the rocks. He thought about the day's storm, about the narrow escapes, about the subtle cues he had learned to read. Each observation, each decision had mattered. Each had saved him. And through it all, Lyra had been there, guiding, teaching, trusting him to rise to the challenge. By the time they reached a safe plateau, the last light of the sun was fading. Elias could see the base in the distance, lights glowing softly against the darkening sky. He felt exhausted, but alive, exhilarated by what he had endured. Tomorrow, Lyra said, her voice calm, you will see the consequences of the storm. You will see life returning, shifting, adapting. And you will notice. That is all that matters. Elias looked at her, the faint scent of rain still lingering around her, and realized that this was more than survival or study. This was understanding life itself, the patterns, the signals, the hidden messages that most beings ignored. He felt a deep connection to her, to the planet, and to the potential within himself and his species. Humans could survive, yes, but they could also notice, adapt, and thrive in ways that others could not. As night fell, Elias lay on the plateau, gazing at the stars, the storm's distant echoes fading into silence. He thought of Lyra, of the lessons she had taught him, and of the journey ahead. The challenges would grow, the storms would return, but he felt ready. Because now he understood something fundamental. Noticing was power. Observing was survival, and acting wisely, with courage and attention, was what made humans remarkable. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying the faint, lingering scent of rain. Elias closed his eyes, listening, noticing, and for the first time, he felt truly alive. The morning sun rose over the desert plains, soft and golden, casting long streaks of light across the wet soil. The storm had passed, leaving the land transformed. Puddles shimmered in the light, and small streams traced new paths through the rocky terrain. Elias stood at the edge of a ridge, surveying the land. The storm had tested him, challenged him, and taught him more than he had ever imagined possible. But today, there was another challenge waiting. Lyra appeared beside him, her movements fluid and graceful, as if she were a part of the desert itself. She did not speak immediately, letting him take in the scene. Elias noticed everything. The subtle shifts in the soil, the small creatures emerging cautiously from their hiding places, the way the plants had bent and reshaped themselves under the storm's force. Each detail told a story, and Elias felt a deep sense of connection to it all.
The storm has left its mark, Lyra said softly, and now the land will reveal more than before.
Do you see it?
Elias nodded. I think so.
The streams, the puddles, even the way the rocks are shaped. Everything tells a story. Lyra's dark eyes gleamed faintly. Good. That is the first lesson. Observation alone is not enough. You must act. You must understand the consequences and help guide life forward. Elias swallowed, his mind racing. He had learned to survive, to notice, to read the patterns of the storm, but acting, shaping what came next, was something new. It required judgment, courage, and the willingness to take responsibility. He looked at Lyra, who stood calmly, a pillar of confidence and knowledge. He realized that she trusted him to make decisions, to rise to the challenge as she had guided him through the storm.
Where do we begin?
He asked.
Lyra pointed to a cluster of small plants near a newly formed stream.
These plants are fragile after the storm. They could be washed away or crushed if the water flows too fast. Humans would normally let it happen, seeing only that nature is dangerous. But you notice. You can help. You can act. Elias approached the plants carefully, studying their roots and the flow of water. He began moving small stones to redirect the current, creating gentle barriers to protect the delicate vegetation. Each action required precision and patience, and he worked slowly, guided by both observation and intuition. Lyra watched, offering advice in quiet whispers, her presence steadying him. Hours passed as they moved through the affected area. Elias directed the water-guided creatures to safer areas, and even stabilized a small burrow that had been exposed by the storm. With each act, he felt a growing sense of confidence, a realization that humans could not only survive, but also contribute meaningfully to the world around them. Lyra's teachings had shown him that noticing, understanding, and acting were a chain, each step vital to the next. By afternoon, the land was calmer, the streams less aggressive, and the plants secure. Elias stepped back, examining their work. It was not perfect, but it was a start. He felt pride mixed with humility, understanding that life was delicate and interconnected, and that even small actions could have profound effects. You did well, Lyra said, her voice calm but carrying warmth. You acted with care, foresight, and attention. Few humans would think to intervene so thoughtfully. Most would simply survive and move on. Elias felt a deep sense of accomplishment. I couldn't have done it without you. You taught me to see what others ignore, to notice and understand. Lyra shook her head slightly.
No. You learned to trust yourself.
You noticed, understood, and acted. That is what makes humans remarkable. You have potential, Elias. Not only to survive, but to thrive and guide others. He nodded, absorbing her words. For the first time, he felt the weight of his species' capability. Humans were clever, adaptable, and capable of extraordinary insight when they took the time to observe and understand. Under Lyra's guidance, he realized that noticing small details, acting with awareness, and learning from experience could make the difference between mere survival and true mastery of a world that seemed hostile and alien. As they moved toward a nearby plateau, Elias noticed a group of small creatures struggling against the current of a narrow stream. Without thinking, he rushed forward, scooping them gently into his hands and placing them on safer ground. Lyra watched silently, her expression unreadable. But Elias felt her approval and the quiet confidence she radiated. "You see," she said finally, "this world speaks to those who listen. Not all humans listen. Few notice."
But you are learning. That is why you survived.
"That is why you will thrive!" Elias felt a surge of determination. "I will continue learning. I will notice, understand, and act whenever I can."
I want to be worthy of the trust you've shown me.
Lyra's gaze softened, a subtle smile appearing on her lips.
Then you are ready for the final lesson, she said. The storm has changed the land. The creatures have moved.
The plants have shifted. Everything is alive, responding. You must now see the whole, not just the parts.
Elias frowned slightly.
The whole? Yes, Lyra said. The patterns, the connections, the balance.
Humans often see fragments and act too quickly. You have learned to notice, to protect, to act carefully. Now you must see how everything is connected, how every choice affects another. They climbed to the top of the plateau, overlooking the vast expanse of desert and rock, streams winding through the terrain like veins of life. Now, Elias studied the landscape, trying to take it all in. He saw the scars left by the storm, the way plants and creatures were adapting, and the subtle changes in the soil and rock formations. Slowly, a picture began to form in his mind. He began to understand the connections, the flow of energy and life across the land.
You see it, Lyra said softly, not as fragments, but as a whole.
This is understanding. This is the true power of noticing and acting wisely. Humans can thrive when they respect the patterns of life, when they do not force control, but work with what exists. Elias felt a rush of exhilaration. He realized that he had grown, not just in skill, but in understanding. The storm had tested him, Lyra had guided him, and now he could see the invisible threads that connected life, land, and weather. He understood that humans could survive, yes, but they could also protect, nurture, and guide life in ways few species could. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Elias turned to Lyra. "I understand now," he said quietly. "I see how everything is connected. I can notice, understand, and act, and I want to do more. I want to help humans see this too." Lyra's eyes glimmered with something like approval, almost pride. "You have grown, Elias. You have learned quickly. Most humans would not understand even a fraction of what you now grasp. But you are different. You noticed. You acted.
You understood. And now you can guide others, showing them what is possible when they pay attention."
Elias felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The journey with Lyra had not only taught him about survival and observation, it had shown him the potential of humanity itself. Humans could be clever, adaptable, and capable of extraordinary insight. They could notice what others overlooked, act with care, and shape the world for the better. The desert was quiet now, the storm's echoes fading into the distance. Small animals ventured out of hiding, plants bent under the soft wind, and streams flowed gently through the terrain. Elias felt connected to it all, a part of the vast, intricate web of life on this planet. Lyra stood beside him, the faint scent of rain still lingering around her. She placed a hand lightly on his shoulder, a gesture of trust and recognition. "Remember, Elias," she said softly, "this is only the beginning."
Life will challenge you again. Storms will come.
Difficult choices will arise, but if you continue to notice, to understand, and to act with care, you and your species will thrive. Humans have the potential to be extraordinary. Do not forget that. Elias nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. "I won't forget," he said. "I will continue learning. I will notice. I will act. And I will help others do the same." The sun disappeared behind distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Elias and Lyra stood together, two figures in a transformed world, bound by trust, respect, and the shared understanding of what it meant to notice, understand, and act. Elias realized that the faint smell of rain, once a small detail, had become a symbol of everything he had learned. It was a reminder that noticing, even the smallest things, could lead to understanding, connection, and the ability to shape the world. He felt a quiet certainty that he was ready for whatever came next, ready to face new challenges, and ready to guide others with the lessons he had learned. As night fell, the desert settled into silence. Elias looked at the stars, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. He thought of Lyra, of the storm, and of the lessons that had transformed him. Humans could survive, yes, but they could also notice, understand, and act in ways that made them remarkable. And he, Elias, had begun to truly understand what it meant to be human in a universe full of wonder and danger. Lyra stepped beside him one last time, her presence calm, steady, and reassuring.
You noticed. You acted.
You understood. And that is what makes humans capable of greatness. Never forget it. Elias inhaled deeply, the cool night air carrying the faint scent of rain.
He had noticed, he had acted, and he had understood. And in that moment, he felt alive, in a way he never had before, connected to the world, to life, and to the potential of his species. The stars twinkled above, the desert whispered beneath, and Elias knew that this journey, with storms, challenges, and lessons, was only the beginning. Humans could rise to any challenge, adapt to any world, and thrive wherever they chose. He had seen it, learned it, and now he carried it within him. And as Lyra's figure faded into the twilight, Elias smiled, knowing that the faint scent of rain would always remind him of what it meant to notice, to understand, and to act wisely.